minister said it's coming. In addition, Madam Speaker, so your cost has gone up because of the hedge. Now they place us in decrease the quality of our livelihood with the heat. You have to run outside. Individuals, you pass through Baintown sometime, Madam Speaker. Individuals are on the porch fanning. You know, in the old days, and you would know, in the old days we could sleep under the window and we take the stick and open the window. Now we've advanced and talked about central air, and now they don't want to give us no electricity, so those central air are useless. You have to go look for your paper fan again. So, Madam Speaker, so your cost has gone up because of the hedging that they, and I don't know whether this word is parliamentary, and I could change it if need be, what they messed up. Then, because of our engines being down, what they had to do, Madam Speaker? They had to lease additional engines. That carries a cost. And who's going to bear that cost? Us. That's additional cost. So they are presently leasing, I think, about 115 megawatts of engine, of energy supply, and about 73 being leased from Sun Oil. So, Madam Speaker, when the F&M was in, when we were in, we had the operation and maintenance cost. Listen carefully so you can see where they've increased our cost again. That's why it's good. Government should be continuous and not selective, but continuous, and we wouldn't run into so many problems. The operation and maintenance cost of BPL, when the F&M was in power, is 1/3 the cost today. So that's additional cost to us. And that's why I scared to see my light bill. I scared, you know, especially when I was sick, Madam Speaker. You know, the problem is, as a doctor, you're knowledgeable. And when you're sick, with the flu, you have fever, the heart rate goes up, you sweat. And if you see that bill, your heart rate goes up further, and you die, shock, heart attack. So that's the quickest way to heart attack. So I told my family, do not, listen, just withdraw the money, pay the bill. But don't let me see it until I get well, please. But, Madam Speaker, these are serious times. Madam Speaker, further evidence of the do or say nothing culture in the Davis administration was at display too. When the Minister of Education, look up, voiced her objection to the Royal Caribbean Paradise Island deal her government supports. She said what she said, and there was no consequences. Now, Madam Speaker, I'm going to be fair and honest today. I like the minister. I like very much, very much. Now, you know, the public don't know, but you know, your husband passed away, but your husband and I were cousins, you know that. So we family. But, Madam Speaker, the member is a nationalist. She is a nationalist. And she seriously believes in Bahamians first. You cannot knock her for that. And I respect her for that. And the position she took, she had no choice. I respect her for that. So, my member, continue along that road. No, ain't no but, ain't no but. Ain't no but. If I was in your constituency, you'd get my vote. Madam Speaker, the speaking out against and defiance of the Prime Minister by PLPs will only get worse over the course of his term. Weakness in leaders causes subordinates to challenge the leader. It is amazing that many in his government are getting away with calling them the Davis Cooper administration. Or we should call it.
David Cooper Cornish.
Cornish, what's his name? Only minutes? What? Madam Speaker, because of my illness and slow movement, I ask for an additional 3 minutes.
Yes, I agree.
Madam Speaker, there was a remarkable spirit. There was a remarkable spirit of togetherness at Clifford Park at the Independence celebration. It is my hope that we keep this spirit throughout this Independence year and beyond. Only the spirit now, not the spending. Only the spirit, not the spending. And we will be asking soon for the expenditure for the Independence events, and we still await the expenditure for the trip to London, to UK, to visit the King. We are blessed to live on these islands, surrounded by such spectacular natural beauty. Let us be good stewards of the gift that God has given us. Let us be good stewards, Madam Speaker, of the resources of the state. And let us be good stewards of our future. And as I have said in the past, may I invoke the God of new beginnings as we continue our national journey. May God bless all of us, Madam Speaker. 1 minute. And may God continue to bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Boy, I saw those, West End, I saw those jackets y'all wanted to put us in. Those yellow jackets, now, you know that was criminal. You couldn't put us in that. That was wrong. That was wrong. I once again, Madam Speaker, wish you and all members of Parliament a happy independence. Prime Minister of Abaco and Deputy Prime Minister, happy independence.
Chair recognizes the honourable member for South Beach.
Didn't want the member for Kalani to mislead you, this House, or the Bahamian public with regards to some of the things he said. While it might have been jovial, as Bahamians, we tend to say a lot of very serious things jokingly. But I cannot speak to the state of the power station on the day that he visited. Maybe that one day, Madam Speaker. But from what I know of the power stations in my time at BPL, clean power stations, it's not far and few between for us. We've always been one of the leaders in this region with regard to the upkeep of our power stations. And I am proud to say that during my 20 years there, we never had an issue with a messy or dirty power station. And Doc, I mean, the member is a doctor, not an engineer. And engineers will tell you that you cannot work in that type of environment. They will not. Again, Madam Speaker, with regards to load shedding, the CEO had a press conference related to load shedding. And to clarify again for you, this House and the Bahamian public, he mentioned that there would be load shedding. But the load shedding is as a result of non-maintenance. During the previous administration, no generators was maintained. And as you know, and everybody knows, generators need to be maintained on an annual basis. For 4 years, no generator at BEC BPL was maintained at all. So in order to ensure that we don't have complete blackout, we need to take a few offline, maintain them while we service the other remaining areas. That is the reason for load shedding. It is not because of incompetence, right? It isn't. Perhaps the member might share with us, this House you, Madam Speaker, and the general public, why, you remember the generators they paraded through Nassau? Yeah. These expensive, that they, huh? Why ain't none of them, why all of them can't work at one time? Yeah. Perhaps the member would share and let us know why, what's the problem there?
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Kalani.
It's unfortunate that the member could sit here or stand here and tell me that my eyes were lying to me over 6 years ago what I saw. And I was wearing my glasses that day. He is telling me I can tell you what I saw.
On that day?
On the,
on that one day?
So you want to say on that one day?
It's clean every day.
Madam Speaker, you know, sometimes it's very difficult to argue with those who don't necessarily know all the facts, you know. And I will sit you down one day and give you a lecture. I will educate you, right? I'm not only a doctor, I'm a man of science. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, honourable member. As many? The chair recognizes the honourable member for St. Barnabas.
Sorry? No bread basket today. Yeah, I don't have a problem being called a bread basket, man. I mean, you're fighting for the people. The right people. You keep on shouting them numbers. Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Rise, Madam Speaker, on behalf of the resilient people of St. Barnabas, who's given me the opportunity to be here for a second consecutive term. I don't take that lightly, Madam Speaker, particularly considering the large political odds that were put next to my name in the lead up to that election. And so, yeah, to PLPs too, yes they did. To PLPs too, to PLPs too. So, Madam Speaker, you know, I will never apologize in helping the Bahamian people, Madam Speaker. All right? Helping the Bahamian people, Madam Speaker. They were poor people, and they were PLPs and F&Ms, Madam Speaker. Thank you very much. Madam Speaker, thank Almighty God for being a citizen, as I always say, of the greatest country in the world. For me, I don't qualify it as the greatest little nation. I believe that the Commonwealth of the Bahamas is the greatest nation on this earth, and I often contend it's because of our country being an incubator of purpose and talent, and everywhere that Bahamians go, they make their mark, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as many members here this afternoon and this morning would have elaborated a bit on the 50 years of independence, I shall do so as well, Madam Speaker, before giving a few thoughts on the bill at hand.
You're dangerous.
But first, Madam Speaker, would like to let the people of St. Barnabas know, as we continue to deal with this extreme heat, that very shortly there will be an announcement to, you'll be able to pick up, for those who need water, you would be able to pick up some bottles of water from the constituency office to help wherever we can, because the truth is, and I would hope that the member for West Grand Bahama and Bimini, the Minister for Social Services, will keep an eye on the homeless. We'll keep an eye on the homeless, especially, and those people who, unfortunately, in our society are already in vulnerable positions in terms of where they sleep. And the fact is that this heat is unbelievably dangerous. And so just to suggest to the member to be aware of the homeless on the street and those, in particular, persons who are very vulnerable, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, you know, I said, I believe, you know, my father taught me, among many things, that you can't be perfect, but you try to be consistent as you can be. And I say that because one of the things that I have been consistent in, and it has been echoed from many members, is the idea that we should be having a bigger discussion and elevating the debate on where we are as a country in our 50 years. And there is no doubt that we should and have recognized the efforts and the sacrifices and the life's work of our forefathers and foremothers. And as others have, would like to congratulate the member for Seabreeze, who was very diligent in her work. It was obvious. My wife and I attended as many events as we could have. And the honorable member, as other members, was there every night, every day, no matter what event it was. And she deserves to be applauded for her efforts, Madam Speaker. Also, Madam Speaker, I'd like to thank the Bahamian people for the honor of sitting on the National Honors Committee with the honorable member for Fox Hill. I consider it a humble honor to be able to find a national way to recognize persons who continue to give and contribute to the Commonwealth of the Bahamas and its development. Madam Speaker, over the past few weeks, like so many other Bahamians, heart was just filled to see the Bahamian pride on display as we reflect on how far we've come as a country. And I often, daily, I should say, try to remind myself, not try, but remind myself daily of this important role that I've been given and how much of an honor it is for all of us, as I'm sure we all do reflect, on the magnitude of the role that we play and not to take it for granted, Madam Speaker. And I was at the celebrations on Clifford Park, as all of us were. And, you know, I make it my business to continuously pinch myself and keep my ego underneath my bed every morning when I get up and pray, so that you can remind yourself that this is not of your doing, it's God's plan. But on Clifford Park that day, my wife and I, we were sitting right behind Dame Marguerite Pinling, the former Prime Minister, the member for Kalani, former Prime Minister Hubert Ingram, and former Prime Minister Perry Christie. And, you know, I sat there just to take it in. And I said to myself that God has given me the opportunity. God has given me the opportunity to be in these surroundings with these persons who would have contributed to this level in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And to bear witness and to hear some very profound conversations, some of which, of course, you don't disclose, you know, but just to hear the discussions among persons who would have been elevated by the Bahamian people to a certain level. And so it was just a reminder as we sat out there that as much as obviously we know that politics itself has a role, that there is much honor to persons regardless of your political stripe, their service to country, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, you know, the past few weeks also, as I reflected on 50 years of independence, and I've said before in this Parliament, are we asking the profound questions consistently and adequately enough in terms of where we are and where we ought to go and where we should be as a people, Madam Speaker? You know, there are real issues that we have. And I believe, Madam Speaker, that even though try as we must to strip away the politics of what these questions might invoke, the truth is that the Bahamian people, even in this 50 years of independence, and we have much to be proud of and much to celebrate, and we honor those, that the Bahamian people, we have a number of challenges at our doorsteps that we will have to confront, Madam Speaker. Right now, Madam Speaker, we look at the Bahamian people having to contend with issues of energy generation in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, and that is real. You know, that is real, and we can get into who fault it is and so forth. But, Madam Speaker, I'm sure we would have seen over social media islands in darkness for hours. You know, people in darkness for hours, the Bahamian people without water in certain places. The infrastructure is failing, Madam Speaker. And I'm sure that every member of parliament here, as you drive around your constituency, because it's in St. Barnabas, and I know that the member for Fort Charlotte spoke to both of those issues, but what is real is that, unfortunately, the place is in a mess. The infrastructure is failing, and the Bahamian people deserve better. They do deserve better. And like I said, I'm sure every member here, as you drive through your constituency, to see the amount of potholes, to see the amount of degradation in public infrastructure, it is something that the Bahamian people rightly should be disgusted of. Particularly, Madam Speaker, when you think about the fact that the Bahamian people make a direct connection between the taxes that they pay. And, you know, it isn't easy, and I know the member for Freetown might have a view on this, because he and I have spoken about this before. It isn't necessarily easy to, you know, to sue the government, well, I should say, easy to sue, but get compensation. The reason why I mention that is because the natural expectation of the Bahamian people should be that they pay their taxes, and if your car falls into a hole, it really should be the government's responsibility to compensate the Bahamian people for what happens to that vehicle. Sorry? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, well, no, listen. No, it ain't a dangerous road. At the end of the day, the Bahamian people expect a certain level of service from government services. That's the point that I'm making. No, but that's they pay their taxes. No, they pay their taxes. They pay the taxes. The point, don't try to. The Bahamian people, they pay their taxes.
Stay focused.
They pay their taxes, and they should expect a certain level of service from the government. I'll repeat again that there are Bahamians who have been contending with darkness
Yes, sir.
in 2023. Darkness. Yeah, darkness. And it's on the day of on Independence Evening, something came across social media where the electricity was out in Abaco. It was out in Abaco during an independence celebration. That's where we are, and that's what we have to contend with. We're now at 61 murders in the Commonwealth, 61 murders in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. 61 murders in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, and that should bother all of us. 61 murders in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, 50 years of independence. And not to suggest, for those who may try to stir it up, that I'm attempting to diminish what we've done in 50 years, because I would never do that. What I'm saying, though, is that as we pivot for the next 25 and the next 50 years, there are real issues that we have to contend with, that this government, because you are the government, has the opportunity. So as much as these 50 years and this 50th year of independence bears great distinction, the question that we must all ask ourselves, and this government must ask themselves, what will the Bahamian people say that this government who was in the 50th year of independence, what did they do on behalf of the Bahamian people? What landmark pieces of legislation has been brought to this parliament for us to truly transform the lives of the Bahamian people in a significant way? The member for Angleton, to her credit, my cousin, to her credit, has been consistent in talking about the challenges facing education, and the most recent former Minister of Education, Minister Jeff Lloyd, also talked about it. So you ask ourselves, what type of education system, what do we want to do? What kind of serious deposit will we continue to put down to educate the next generation of Bahamians and to mitigate? Madam Speaker, just being very, I'm trying to get us to the point, Madam Speaker, to make the larger point that we have real issues, that we ought to deal with in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, Madam Speaker. We have the issue of immigration, that is front and center. And once you strip away the politics, the reality of it is what Bahamians feel. I'm not talking about xenophobia. What Bahamians feel is real and true. The member for Centerville talked about it today, about Bahamians not feeling like they're second-class citizens. So Bahamians talk about, so they have their land, and when their land is occupied, and they try to get people off, they talk about the injunctions that happen and how it disadvantages them. These are real issues, and even when we go back to the need for criminal justice reform and judicial reform, and I know we've all talked about it, why are we bringing bills to this Parliament to make the necessary changes that even the Commissioner of Police has talked about that needs to happen? When are we going to be dealing with these major issues, Madam Speaker? So, Madam Speaker, I know that often there's this attempt to say that you're not talking about the bill, but the truth is that these are, yeah, that's when it's appropriate for you, no problem. But Madam Speaker, and the thing about this, as we talk about this, as I look at this bill, Madam Speaker, you think about the magnitude of some of the things I've just talked about, but we've come here to find a way to stop certain classes of people from paying $250 when we have real significant issues that we can be dealing with, Madam Speaker. I say again, Madam Speaker, in 2023, Madam Speaker, Bahamians, North Auckland was out without power for 3 hours, South Auckland was out for 4 hours, right? Madam Speaker, but here's the truth that the government has to deal with. No, that's not the point. No, that's not the point. The point is it shouldn't be 3 and 4 hours. And ever since this government has come to office, BPL has not been the same. BPL has not been the same. BPL has not been the same since the government has come to office. And the level of power generation and what the Bahamian people are experiencing has not been the same, Madam Speaker.
You're wrong.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Central and South Africa.
Madam Speaker.
Starting on point of order, I believe good gentleman from St. Barnabas is seriously misleading the Bahamian public in a whole. When you look at road degradation, it's not something that happens overnight. It's something from lack of governments over the previous administration that has caused us to be in this situation that we're in now. When you're speaking about BPL and how the problems are consistent now, that's because of lack of maintenance, lack of proper distribution. I know particularly from Abaco where the lines were thrown up on the rocks. The power, the management was deprived of the tools and the necessities that they needed to get the jobs done. I speak to the men on the ground on a daily basis who work night and day to work with what they have. And it is obvious, it's clear that everything was dismantled from the previous. So these aren't things that just pop up and happen overnight. And this relates to crime as well. But what I do see is almost 2 years in, I see optimism. I see a brighter future. I see the Bahamian populace looking like we are going to come out of this better than before, looking like they have a government that cares. But I just want to say that it's very misleading to say and go down the line that he was at that moment.
Thank you, honourable member. The chair recognizes the honourable member for Kalani.
Madam Speaker, since the member following on the footsteps of the member from South Beach. I challenge both members to bring the maintenance log here to Parliament and table those logs, which would show the facts. Otherwise, they need to withdraw what they're saying because they know that they're not speaking validity or truth.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, you know, I hear the member, you know, talk about that these things didn't just happen. The reality of it is, Madam Speaker, I'm sure that the honourable member isn't suggesting that the holes that are in these roads, the multitude of holes in the roads is a result of 2 years. Can be, my God, the Bahamian people would really be in problems if these holes were wrong prior to 2 years ago. Madam Speaker, the truth is, nothing tells the Bahamian people more about competency and ability of the government to govern than the ability to keep up the infrastructure. And right now, the government is failing in that regard, Madam Speaker. Failing in that regard. Madam Speaker, no matter how, you have a constituency, Madam Speaker, called Bamboo Town. And I'm sure if you were to give your opinion, if you chose to, ma'am, you would be able to say you have a problem with holes in the streets in Bamboo Town. As every constituent, as every member of Parliament would be able to speak. And I challenge any member to stand up and say their roads are good in their constituency and they all good. Exactly. So no member will stand up and say that. Right? Okay. So, Madam Speaker, I understand the importance. Every piece of legislation has a different level of importance. There's no doubt. Different level of importance and different constituencies. Yeah, no doubt. But I do think it's a matter of prioritizing the needs of the Bahamian people, and we have to be very careful in how selective we are with pieces of legislation, particularly when you look at the challenges of the Bahamian people, Madam Speaker. The member for Senate, again, I really appreciated his contribution this morning, because in this 50th year, we have to, as we go into the next 50, we really have to embrace this level of active citizenship that I've talked about as well, and that our people appreciate that as much as government has a responsibility, in which government does, as individual citizens, we all have an obligation. So the greatness that we wish to see our country fulfill is directly tied to our ability individually to make the sacrifices we need to make, Madam Speaker. And speaking about ensuring that our people are not treated like second-class citizens. You know, I drove around the island the other day, Madam Speaker, and I understand there's similar challenges in some of the family islands where, you know, access to beaches, and a number of the legal entryways that exist. You know, homeowners are being very strategic. It's a problem we've had for a while, and it's something that we need to address because Bahamians are getting boxed in, and access to beaches are becoming very, very, very limited, Madam Speaker. Also, Madam Speaker, there was something that was in the papers this morning, and it's been around for, I think, the last week. I do not know, let me say full disclosure, I do not know some of the intimate details of the situation. I've spoken to members of the union relative to what is happening to a shop steward over at Atlantis, right? But I would just say this, that shop stewards, in particular, who represent the union, who are employed by companies, should be treated in a proper way. I don't know the circumstances, but they deserve their protection. And I hope that matter is resolved, because we want any company in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas that have union members to deal with union members properly, to the benefit of workers, and quite frankly, a harmonious environment obviously benefits the business environment, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, as I take my seat, Madam Speaker, I believe that the future of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas will be great. During the many different events where you would have seen, even at the beach retreat, and you would see the number of young people involved in our security branches and all levels of our country. There is no doubt that the future of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas is in good hands, and let us continue to support the young people of this country. And it was just wonderful, Madam Speaker. I rushed on the morning after Clifford Park, on the morning of the 10th, rushed for that great group, the Valley Boys, and just to see the smiles. Yeah, it was for the Valley Boys, but it was because we were celebrating, just to see the smiles on the faces of Bahamians who, and even as you paraded down Bay Street, who were really reflecting on what it is to be Bahamian, what the Bahamas, what their country has done for them. I would just add to that, and I did say it to a number of Bahamians who would stop me, is that, yes, our country has done a lot for us, but we have to ask now, what are we prepared to do for our country in the development of our communities, the larger Bahamian society, and the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, Madam Speaker. I do wish as well, Madam Speaker, to really pay homage, Madam Speaker, truly pay homage to our forefathers and foremothers. I think I've spoken before that my stepfather had a gas station on Shirley Street. And I used to pump gas. And one of the most memorable experiences in doing that was the persons who would come there to receive gas. Celestial Thompson. Celestial Thompson was the first commissioner. The member for Anglican's father used to come to that gas station as well. Mr. J. Henry Boswick, Kelsey Johnson, all sorts of persons from all walks of life. And what I did appreciate that my stepfather had persons from all political walks of life who would come to that gas station, and whose cars I would put gasoline in. So just very grateful to all of those persons who would have paved the way for us and who would have sacrificed. All of the prime ministers, from Sir Lyndon Pinling to the present prime minister, for their service in that capacity. Because the truth is that heavy is the head that wears the crown, and obviously history is the ultimate judge of all of those persons, including the member for Kalani, who've led our country, and history will take care of that. But in the realm of service to country, we thank them. We thank them, Madam Speaker, and all who have contributed to creating the greatest country in the world, the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member Asmini. The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Engliston.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I won't be long. I just wanted to indicate my support for this legislation, and to do so as I stand on behalf of the wonderful people of Engliston. Madam Speaker, you know what I like about the people of Engliston? They're just so real and honest, and they're very discerning. They always figure it out when you come in with some sort of, not that I've done that, I try not to do that, I try to be very frank with the people I represent, but they're very discerning and very politically astute. It's amazing. And they're there watching watching what's going on in the political landscape, and they make their judgments. And so I really want to say how much I appreciate the people of Engliston for all those frank discussions and those real talks and those honest interactions. I'm very grateful to them. And I wanted to just mention a few things before I indicate my full support for the legislation. The member for Long Island made some assertions in this parliament, and I mean, you really, I have a problem with just making a point for the sake of it, because you see something and say, oh, see it there. you know, because you're really trying to, in my view, seeking to be spectacular and scandalous. But on the issue that he raised about some sewage rolling down the road, I think he's alleged in the operating theater. And I happened to follow up with the minister, and he's indicating that there was a leak near the operating theater at Princess Margaret Hospital, or what we call the outer bound. The area was hoarded off, assessed by an external contractor, and is now being repaired. There is a block in the column, and an alternative route is being utilized. At no time was leakage in the operating theater. And he says also that any claim of some similar situation in the RAND is not correct. What the minister, and I'm not here to quote him, but what he did opine is that the member for Long Island, who speaks so much about the situation in Long Island, did not find it fit to speak about the clinics that are being repaired, the nurses' residence that's being repaired, the doctors' residence that are being prepared. But it's happening right under his eyes. But he won't talk about what happened, what he say happened at Princess Margaret Hospital, which is, you know, as we are now being advised, is not correct. So I'd like to correct the record on that. The second thing I want to speak to is member for Kalani spoke about education. And I think the member for St. Barnabas, you know, I recognize the strategy. No, it's a strategy, and I recognize it, but I want to say to the member for Kalani, the issue of, I agree with you, pre-primary is the way to go. The problem, though, is it's such a long-term issue. It would 10, 12 years. So yes, you make incremental steps towards it. But the difference in our approach, though, is that we don't have 10 or 12 years. That's a generation of young person. So we have put in place strategies to immediately address the issue of the deficit of pre-primary. Yeah. Two ends. One of those is that we've been looking at reforming the curriculum for grade 1, so that in the first term of grade 1, where those children have not had access to pre-primary, they will be concentrating on literacy and numeracy and the fundamental skills, so that when they move through to the second term in grade 1, they will have been recharged in terms of that experience. The other thing that we've been looking at, where you spoke about going from grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, and et cetera, we've determined we're not going to allow that. We're not going to allow that. So what we've done is a study of GLAT in the last 10 years. And we've seen it's a diagnostic test. We've seen the results and what those results are telling us about in every single child. What happens is that you don't do anything, no one has been doing anything. You get a diagnostic test, and then you just keep moving the child through. I mean, what's the point of a diagnostic? So what we are doing now is developing strategies with the teachers, with the administrators, with parents. I met with parents myself, more than 1,000 parents, on GLAT. And we will not contemplate a situation where a child takes a GLAT exam, which shows a major deficit, and we don't intervene. So we now have strategies that are underway, being developed for intervention strategies for children at all levels. So I just wanted to speak to that so that there's an understanding of what our approach has been on that issue. The third thing I want to talk about is BPL. And I've mentioned this before in here, you know, and you know, I hear St. Barnabas and Kalani, and come on, and I also heard the former minister. And I said, Lord have mercy, what is happening with our institutional recollection, historical recollection of BPL under the FNM? It's the most chaotic, disastrous, shady, suspect oversight of BPL that I think the nation has ever seen. I made 1 or 2 notes about it. I'll make some notes. First of all, you had the mysterious fire. Remember that fire? And we know what happened there, but remember the fire? And the insurers, you had the mysterious fire. Then you had an entire board, the board, the chairman, everybody gone. Everybody quit BPL under the Free National Movement. And what the chairman said at the time was that there were concerns about transparency about with the operations, what was going on there. The third thing is the issue of General Electric. I never really understood it fully, but I know the Americans got involved in that. There was some to do with General Electric where you shift course on the matter. And then there was the, I hear you talking, I'm going to find the article. No. I'm talking about when you come in here with a straight face and say, oh, BPL. Listen, and as the member for South Beach has said, a lot of these issues are historical. They're sustained. They've been sustained. And the former administration made a bad situation worse. That's what has to be understood here. A bad situation. You can't mash it up and then come the next day when you ain't got power no more, walking around and say, oh, you ain't do this, you ain't, as if you are some great proprietors of some great intelligence on energy and electricity in this country. The Abaconians will tell you, Abaco electricity been going off and off for the entire period under the Free National Movement. They forget. And there was a time in New Providence where the load shedding was so excessive and sustained, people were sleeping on the beach. And the Prime Minister, then Prime Minister Kalani, Kalani said, we are in a crisis. The Minister of Works said we're not, the then Minister of Works, but the then Prime Minister said we are in a crisis. So I say all of that, and I just want to, and there was a study done, and I don't have it available to look at it, but this, as you will know, the FTI consulting firm made some observations about some of the dealings under the Minister's administration. And they said, and they make the point that it would, let me not guess what they say. They say that the efforts to outsource electricity generation on New Providence were oblique. That's a very diplomatic word, and you can't see through it too good. Okay? So, this is why I say, like the people in Engliston, you can't be there, ain't got nothing to say, do all kind of things, mismanage everything, then come here and talk about this and the next thing and the next thing. Please, our people have some intelligence. Don't do it. What we do need, what I would prefer, if something Barnabas said to the nation, we need reform on energy. We need reform because this has been an issue that is being challenging, even though under the Free National Movement, I've never seen such chaos and total mismanagement. I was surprised the former member for Carmichael went on a show talking about this. I say, he must believe people forget it. So, and I want to say for the member for Cat Island, Rumkey and San Salvador, he has taken this conversation further than we have seen in recent times in this country. He has talked about solarization. He's talked about green energy. He's talked about LNG. He's moved through the Bahamas, and he's gone internationally to make the case for the Bahamian people about carbon emissions. And so I think that would have been an appropriate argument for the Bahamian people, not assuming that they can't remember nothing, that they forget they was catching, almighty you-know-what, and that there was some very questionable dealings on the face of it under the prior administration. And, I'm prepared to move on, but don't take me back, don't cause me to go back there. And that's all I want to say about that. The other thing, the other point I want to make, the member for Kalani also spoke about, and I just want to remember, and don't forget, there were 90 million in fuel arrears that we were nicely gifted by the former administration. So on the issue of, and I'm going to be delicate with this one, I think the member for St. Barnabas talked about the criminal justice system and reform and legislation. And what we saw under the prior administration, the manipulation on the face of it, of former politicians. And I was just telling a colleague, when one of them, who was one of the youngest amongst the ones who were targeted, when he was carted to prison, professional. I cried. I cried. And you know, I just want to, and I don't want to go too deep into it, because a lot of them had to spend money. They were all vindicated. Those who stood, at least two of them stood trial. One all the way to Privy Council, and Privy Council say, what you bring this here for? They were challenging the magistrate court action, and then it went to Supreme Court. But what the magistrate sitting at the time said was that, and I'm trying to get the right language, she indicated that the involvement of two senior ministers of government, one of whom had jurisdiction over the armed forces, police. And I think the language, when was the language she used? I think she said it was, no, I'm trying to use her exact word. She said it was off the, well, I'll say off the wall. It didn't look right. And I don't want to misquote her, but what her point was that it did not look proper or appropriate. Okay? It did not, so I mean, you know, when you're talking about reform of the judicial system, what we want to see is that kind of thing where you have actual involvement. Politicians put their hand right in it. That we don't see that again in our country. That we don't see it again. You don't have to defend anyone. You see a politician. Oh, well, you tell me about it. Yes, so you say. So you say. Let us see what the court says. Ask the ones who have cooperated with their involvement with other individuals. Please, don't go there. This is not, you're talking about apples and oranges. It's not the same thing. So I just want to say, you know, yes, we'd like to see reform. We don't want to see that happen again. Okay, we don't see that happen again. So when it relates to BPL and the mismanagement and the murky engagement by the former administration, the entire resignation of the board, one of whom I think was the campaign manager for the minister during the elections. And she said, you fundraiser. She had to disassociate herself with what was happening at that time. Okay? Well, yeah, that's another thing. Yeah, they said she used the money to buy. They started to insult her and degrade her afterwards. You know? So, you know, the final thing I just want to say before I get to my full support of this legislation, thank you very much, is, let me just see what this is here. Oh, this is the BPL Shell deal process oblique. And this is actually from Hartnell, and he speaks about it. He talks about the 19 bids and on and on. So, I mean, I've already touched on that, but this is an independent report on the oblique efforts of the, I'll tell you what it is. It's Neil Hartnell, Tribune report, and what he does, he summarizes the the deal with, let me read from it, seeing that we want to talk about it. He says that the report by international consultants commissioned by the Prime Minister's office under the administration reveals that even BPL's then chief operating officer under that administration questioned the transparency and fairness of a process that resulted in the multinational energy giant's North American arm winning the contract to install 220 megawatts in new generating capacity. And then it goes on and on. They found that of the 19 bids received by BPL reflected multiple options, and it goes on. And this says that the Tribune Business on April 12, 2018 revealed the concerns among some participants over the structure of the bidding process. And then it goes on and on. Prime Minister Hubert Minnis was quoted in the press as saying that EY found minor irregularities, but none that could have changed the outcome of the bidding. Hastie made a similar comment to FDI. The FDI consultant report, though, said there was nothing to support suggestions that Mrs. Osborne had objected to the deal while BPL chair. Osborne reportedly objected to entering in a contract with Shell prior to a review by outside counsel. In interviews with FDI, neither Hastie nor Ferron Bethel and then they go on the dispute between the board that was appointed by the then administration and the administration at the time. and it goes on and on. So, but I think what I am seeking to emphasize here is that they found that their efforts to outsource electricity generation were oblique and not fully transparent over deal ultimately by Shell North America. So that is the, oh, that's the language? The member for Freetown said that they say highly irregular, but I got to read it more closely to get that part. The other point I just want to state, I think the member for Kalani made a distinction between being a nation and being independent. And I understand the distinction that you make, but independence brought about what we call the nation state. It's a legal status, but it also brought with it symbols and culminations of the shared space and ethos that we have as a people. And so whatever we had pre-73 became hugely intensified after independence. And I just wanted to refer to the Bahamian people, Madam Speaker might know, is that there was, and I'm trying to remember the year, it might have been 1970, when the American government wanted to dump nerve gas in Bahamian waters. What year was that, 70? 1970. August 1970. And there was always the fear that, they said they had it encased in concrete things, right? But there was always a fear that it could seep out. And the Bahamas was not comfortable with being used as a dumping ground for poisonous, toxic materials, and objected to it. And because we were not sovereign, they went over our heads to the British, and the British consented to this, for this to happen. For many in the Progressive Liberal Party at that time, who might have been previously opposed, this became the turning point for them. And so independence enhanced nationhood, but it also brought about an important fundamental component to our identity as a people and the legal status to make decisions as a full, free, equal member in the United Nations and anywhere in this world. And so independence, while you could say we shared values as a people pre-1973, 1973, July 10th, brought about a paradigm shift in our identity as a people and in our growth and in our self-identification as a Bahamian people. So I think, and I just want to say that on the issue of BPL, I just want to reiterate, everyone knows it's not new, the challenges that we face. Everyone knows that. So for those who want to continue to seek to perpetuate some myth that this is some phenomenon that we just found today, I want to remind, particularly on the other side, to take their minds back to the mismanagement, mishandling, and oblique operations that they were associated with in the management of BPL. The way forward is to get beyond fossil fuels and to find the space for alternative energy in this country, and let us do it right. And that is the challenge that we face. Much of what we are doing is trying to patch a situation that has been marred, broken, wounded over a period of years. And under the former administration was chop and juke and all kinds of things. And so I end on that point. I just want to say on the legislation, on the notary public, it does two things. It doesn't just deal with lawyers who are in politics. That's part of it. I was one of those. When I went into private practice after our party lost, I had a huge raise, and I hadn't practiced law. And I had to work out a payment schedule with them because I didn't come out of politics rich. And I went with them, and I had to work out an arrangement with them to pay it off. So that is simply to deal with when you're not active because you are occupied elsewhere, that you do not build up arrears. The second component is that the legislation, that the license takes effect from the day that you pay it. So it's not retroactive. So you pay it in March, it doesn't go back to January. And that if you do something between January and March, which is not covered, then it's not a notary action because you're not a notary. So it's dealing really with the fact that the licensing, and they give you a 30-day leeway or grace period. But it deals, and I think this is the fundamental aspect of the legislation, that it seeks to encourage notaries to become licensed on the 1st of January. That's what it seeks to do, so that you do not act as a notary without a license and then come down the road later and then seek to have it retroactively activated to the 1st of the year. So it's those who are going to abstain. I haven't heard the reasoning yet, except they say that it's a conflict of interest. But it deals with more than one thing, and it fundamentally deals with the thing I just said. So it's, I guess they will search their conscience whether this is such an egregious action in this Parliament that they cannot support this amendment to the law. So, Madam Speaker, I think that would be all that I have to say. I just finally I heard the thing about, I think the member for St. Anne's talked about where's this and where's that and where's the next thing. How many pieces of legislation passed? More than 100 pieces of legislation, surpassing what the former administration did in 4 years. We have done less than 2 years. And on the table right now, as the member St. Anne's has pointed out, is some fundamental legislation dealing with issues that have been long-standing, and we look forward to dealing with the ombudsman. We look forward to dealing with the gender-based violence legislation and all of those pieces that are there. We're not afraid to confront the issues that this nation faces, and we don't want to do it. We don't put lipstick on it. We want to create fundamental change to advance the Bahamian people. And that is why on the issue of climate change, I went with Senator Halkidas along with the Prime Minister to University of Bahamas. There is a climate change conference going on for young people, and we had a panel discussion. But I wanted to highlight that if the member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador is championing this issue, he's doing it throughout this nation. He's doing it in changes, including the issue of carbon credits, where he pointed out today that the Bahamas is leading the way on this new pathway of climate energy and climate change, and how do you deal with carbon emissions and et cetera. And that the issue of, what does he call it? Climate justice. They don't use the word reparations, climate justice, because the Bahamas is one of the 10 most vulnerable nations in the world. So we pay a high price, for the actions of big, wealthy nations who are excessive in their expression of their economy. And we, as we saw with Dorian and Joaquin, pay a high price. And so he is to be credited and to be congratulated for the work that he is doing in bringing this issue to the consciousness of the Bahamian people and to the world, along with other persons in the region and elsewhere in the world. And so, Madam Speaker, I just end by saying that I think it's very important that when we debate in this Parliament, and that we seek to ignite the sensibilities of our people and not insult the sensibilities of our people. And I'm not saying anyone is doing that, but I think it's very important to have rational arguments. It's particularly on issues like a BPL, which has a very rugged history under the former administration. And I think that they are not qualified to speak on this issue with any level of criticism or et cetera, because much of what we are dealing with is the inherited product of a chaotic period in the life of the Bahamian people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Member Asmini. The chair recognizes the honourable member for Marco City.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Give thanks to Almighty God for this opportunity to once again be in the Parliament of the Bahamas and to say how grateful I am to the residents of Marco City for their consistent support. Madam Speaker, I wish to, during this difficult time, extend condolences to several families that some have laid their loved ones to rest, others are in the process of doing so. Madam Speaker, at this time I'd like to pay homage to and remember Colin Edgecombe and to say to the entire family how much we pray for you and our thoughts go out to you during this difficult time, especially Cordero. Madam Speaker, we also wish to remember Rudolph Rigby and to say to Matisse, one of our incredible creatives in the Bahamas, how much we grieve with you, and to the relatives of Selena Roll, and especially to Edna, how much we are praying for you. And to the family of Willard Martin and Eunice Cox Munnings, to say to Brigida and to Mrs. Cox Forbes how much we are praying for you, and to the relatives of Francois Burrows and Charles Dickerson, to let them know that we are praying for them and their family. And Madam Speaker, our heart goes out to Mrs. Mortimer, Chris' mother, who has lost in a very short time 2 of her sons. It is a very difficult time for Mrs. Mortimer and the rest of the family to first lose Chris and then to lose his younger brother a short time thereafter. We know that God has the ability to heal the broken heart and to provide comfort in the midst of sorrow. Madam Speaker, we expected on this side to have a question and answer period, which the leader of opposition business has ably laid out the case, that this is not a courtesy, as was suggested by the Prime Minister in previous debates. This is an entitlement. Madam Speaker, we have chosen on this occasion to use this time to still put those questions on the public record, but we do encourage the government to honor this entitlement and let us have on a regular basis question and answer period, and then to provide full and candid answers to the questions. Madam Speaker, I brought with me the list of the answers that have been provided, and we have gone through the tedious task of noting questions that were inadequately answered, or in some cases, ministers saying we'll get back to you and fail to do so. Madam Speaker, it is relevant if previous administrations have not answered questions, inclusive of the administration I was proud to be a part of. But we are in opposition. So if that may be a part of the pronouncement of a verdict by the public. You are in the chair now, and you have an obligation to consistently answer the questions being raised and to do so in a candid and frank manner. Madam Speaker, one of the questions that we asked related, Madam Speaker, to the issue of the $150 million arrears. And we asked the Minister of Works, who's responsible for BPL, or the Prime Minister, to help us understand the breakdown of these arrears. We got no answer. We went on, Madam Speaker, after it was revealed in a report that the government made a loan to BPL. We asked by what authority was $110 million transferred to BPL. Madam Speaker, we were not trying to be cute or salacious when we said it was a misappropriation of funds. Madam Speaker, we were essentially referencing the Constitution itself of the Bahamas, which made the point that if central government is minded to make a loan available to a government corporation, it must be done out of particular appropriations. And that's why we come during the budget cycle or through a supplemental budget in order to execute these kinds of arrangements. Or if funds were already in a particular area, that you can then, through finance, you can then wire funds to another location. So we were not being cute when we charged this administration of misappropriation. In other words, in an inappropriate manner, moving funds to a corporation not appropriately authorized to do so, Madam Speaker. And we only discovered that $110 million was made available to BPL when it showed up in a report, and then a senior member of finance, when questioned about it, identified BPL as the agency. We've said it before, and we have numerous examples. This administration only partially fesses up once discovered. Once discovered. There's one rule for the Davis-Cooper administration, and there's a different rule for the rest of the public. So that was one of the questions we asked. And this is why we ask these questions, because you discover things when you put questions to the government and they candidly answer. And very seldom does this administration do that. We also ask of the minister with responsibility for the public service and foreign affairs, if he would advise the House on the number of retired public officers who return to work. And are these public officers receiving full pension and pay? What is the quantum? What is the total amount that's being paid? We value our senior public servants who have retired, and many of them still have a contribution to make in different ways. But let's be transparent about what we're doing, and then also let's do it in a way that does not disadvantage persons who reasonably expect to be promoted in these ministries, only to have to wait another 5 years for an opportunity to move up when they are entitled to do so. Far too many people living on the time of others whose time has come. That's why we must resist people who have gone past the period of time when they ought to occupy a position and still fighting for it, or others facilitating them to get there, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we also ask, will the Honorable Minister advise the House on the number of envoys this administration has added, and are all of these envoys paid, Madam Speaker? We have not gotten the complete, we've not gotten the complete details. It was asked by a member on our side, and we still have not gotten all of the details with respect. Yes, well, yes, it's in the document, and these are the questions we were going to ask. And if the minister is going to be absent, he has one of the most competent ministers in your administration is in that ministry as the Minister of State and should be authorized to answer it. You are one administration, though you continue to demonstrate that you do not speak with one voice, I would say at all. Well, very seldom you do. We also will ask, will the Honourable Minister advise the Honourable House on the amount of Foreign Services officers, attachés, and other staff members this administration has posted, and where have they been posted? Madam Speaker, we have also asked of the Prime Minister, will the Honourable Prime Minister advise this Honourable House of the terms of engagement for the consulting firm McKinsey & Company? And what procurement process was used to engage this firm? How many bids were received? What is the value of the contract, and how much has been spent to date? Madam Speaker, we have asked numerous questions. This is not an administration that is prepared to be transparent. Yet it is an administration that is prepared to talk about transparency and accountability, but refuse to demonstrate it in their action. That's why this administration has entered into numerous confidential, they call it, the appropriate term is secret settlements with a number of persons who felt aggrieved by the administration that I served in. And Madam Speaker, we don't have any difficulty. We've said it before in here, that if somebody was unceremoniously transferred to a different location, but they didn't lose any income, They didn't lose any benefits. They possibly suffered embarrassment. Yeah, yes, there's a price for that, no doubt. But when you do not reveal what the quantum is that you're paying, you have hung a cloud over the heads of these officers, these senior persons who may otherwise be doing the right thing every day. But one has to ask the question, how much was given? Was it beyond what is ordinarily given in other jurisdictions that then raises questions about what is all that extra money for? And this is what this administration has done to public servants. Put a cloud over their head. The secrecy within which you operate. The secrecy also is extended to all of the contracts, many of the contracts that have been signed. What are you hiding? Why is it a problem that you're unable to publish the hundreds of contracts, the hundreds of millions of dollars you are spending of the people's money, not your money, the people's money? How difficult could it be to simply reveal who you are entering into an agreement with? What are the terms of the contract? What is the duration of the contract? Unfortunately, this is an administration that talks about accountability and transparency, but in your consistent action, you demonstrate you have no commitment to do so. Under my administration, we will behave different than you. We will not only be an improvement on you, we will be an improvement on what we were as well. Because every government ought to be an improvement on its predecessor. And that's why when I heard the member for Angleton speak, I don't disagree with the member for Angleton. BPL has some legacy issues. However, it does not disqualify us from being able to make concrete recommendations on the way forward and to critique the government that's in the chair when it fails to live up to its own promises. In the blueprint in the blueprint for change that you have, you said within 100 days, you would evaluate all that is happening with BPL. You will set it on a course to lower electricity rate. You talk about increasing in a dramatic way the complement or the portion of our energy mix that comes from renewals. So you had a long list of things you intended to do relative to the energy space. The biggest one in our mind is you promised to come up with a comprehensive plan to take BPL forward. So we are within our rights, notwithstanding any shortcomings and failings that we would have had in the energy space. We are within our rights to now critique you and to raise questions about your stewardship. And one, you have refused to come up with a comprehensive plan with respect to the development of BPL and the transformation of the energy sector. You failed, absolutely. 20 months later, and your board could not come up with, the minister could not come up with, the Minister of Finance could not come up with a comprehensive plan with respect to BPL. You failed. You failed to protect Bahamian consumers and Bahamian businesses that tell you that the cost of electricity is an albatross around their necks. So what have you done? You've gotten recommendations on a hedge program which you refused to follow, and when you realized the mistake was massive, you then lied about it. The minister, in 11 minutes and 11 seconds, he had 8 times he stood on his feet in this house and misled the Parliament of the Bahamas that he did not receive the advice, when in essence he did receive the advice. He told an untruth. I think they are synonyms, but I take your point. And so the bottom line is 8 times in 11 minutes and 11 seconds, 8 times misled this house. Again, mistake was already made, did not take the advice, but then sought to cover up the fact. And what was the result? The result is this public, the residents in Mason's Addition, or in Key Street where I grew up, or 7th Street where I grew up, or Jenny Street, or Melbourne Road in Yellow, all of them experience a 163% increase in fuel charge because of the mistake of this administration, and then the added sin of seeking to conceal it. So when you talk about legacy problems, you're right. We met a legacy problem, and we saw through a rate reduction bond to address it. We failed to fully execute it. We failed to execute it. The same rate reduction bond that the present Prime Minister, when he was in the chair, had an interest in introducing. It was developed, refined by a board that was put in place, and it had the potential to help us raise the $500+ million to retire the legacy debt, to re-engineer, to change the infrastructure, to train the staff. And we didn't pull the trigger on it. You came in, got advice, while interest rates were low enough in the international market to make it worthwhile, and again missed an opportunity. So what we are experiencing today is not merely a result of legacy problems, because in 2021, summer that was hot like this one, there were no blackouts and load shedding that you're experiencing now. Right now in Eleuthera, people are having tremendous problems. Ask the member for Central and South Eleuthera. Today, electricity as well as water. Talking about energy, you're struggling with education
for
and Sorry, the time? The time.
I'd like to bring attention to the article in the Tribune. It says BPL is failing its customers. Tuesday, July 27, 2021. And it starts, it's summer and power is going out. It's a similar occurrence, it goes on, says a similar occurrence, and one that prompted Bahamas Power and Light officials yesterday to ask for customers to bear with the company. It goes on to say what the chairman would have said, and it says July 2021. For starters, the company could be more transparent and about the problems they are having and the dialogue with customers. And it says yesterday, Dr. Moxie said that the problem wasn't load shedding, which BPL had pledged had come to an end, that it was transmission and distribution event going on to a point, a lack of funding and for infrastructure upgrades. Meanwhile, the union president said that maintenance issues were the cause of outages. And they asked, well, which is it? It goes on to say that you can say that it seems that as they solve one problem, that only runs into another problem, and it ends with, so come clean, BPL, tell us everything, and not just vague terms, and respect your customers enough to keep them updated. There's also part of the article which speaks to numerous calls, complaints, and no updates, silence from the other side on the issues of mass outages. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member.
If you can lay the document for me, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the parliamentary secretary, would you permit me to speak, young man? No. Would you permit me to speak, please? Thank you very. I appreciate you. The member for South Beach. Madam Speaker, the member for South Beach indicated that we had a historical problem that was plaguing BPL, and that the problem the ministry had was the inability for generation to meet the demand. What he cited, Madam Speaker, does not speak to that particular point. There was not an issue of the ability to generate power. We had capacity, Madam Speaker. You can have, let me finish the point. You can have outages, as he said, with a fire. You can have outages because somebody hits a pole. But this was not an issue of that we did not have the capacity to generate power. And the article does not speak to us lacking the capacity to generate power. That was the point. That was the point that was made. So again, what I'm saying to you is that the outages that occurred, if you can lay an article that simply says that the government does not have the capacity to withdraw, no problem, I'd have no problems withdrawing that. We did have serious issues in BPL, but I identify the ones you are responsible for. You are responsible for the $110 million right now that the government illegally funneled to BPL because you made a mistake not to take advice on the hedging. And that is the issue, Madam Speaker. We raise, Madam Speaker, a number of questions in this House we expecting the government to answer. Madam Speaker, an issue of great importance to us. And by the way, not only Lutra is having problems with outages, Auckland's Michael, in fact, our heart went out to the Member of Parliament for Michael. He had one of the most sobering presentations during the budget, appealing to his colleagues not to neglect his island and to make the requisite investments after they've taken large entourages to visit and inspect. What he wanted was results, Madam Speaker. So on multiple islands, we are having issues with outages. The second issue, Madam Speaker, I want to rush to real quick. So let me just button this up by saying you have an opportunity to learn from any mistakes we may have made and mistakes the PLP in its previous iteration made. And so you ought to come up with a comprehensive plan. You ought to empower persons in Andros, have a group of Bahamians with whoever strategic partner they have, who can, in fact, through renewables, provide power not just to Andros, but to various keys and family islands. Let's empower Bahamians. Let's create a society of ownership by allowing them at the generation level, not through distribution and transmission. The government has a fair amount of infrastructure in place, but at the generation level, we have an opportunity. $20 million is a minuscule but important step, but 20 million, maximum 5 megawatts for what we're talking about. Huh? Okay? So we have a chance to do something different in terms of empowering Bahamians, and the Family Island gives us the best opportunity to do so. We also need to, in this comprehensive plan, is make sure that BPL is not the agency that has veto power to determine the level of self-generation by individuals or companies. How could you have the competitor adjudicating who gets the authority to enter into the space that they already dominate as a monopoly? So I believe we have an opportunity to do something substantially different. And so I say even to the Minister of Agriculture and Education, we have an opportunity. We have an opportunity to take agriculture, or all of the agriculture and education facilities off the grid and make that a particular renewable energy project. So I'll stop there. I want to move very quickly, Madam Speaker, with the limited time we have, to the issue of immigration. We call on the government to establish a select committee on immigration to look at all things related to immigration, not just illegal migration, but also positive migration. We live in Grand Bahama that has a small population that can benefit from a growth in population. But if we are to welcome persons from elsewhere in the Bahamas or people from overseas, it should be on Bahamian terms, that you come in the right way through the front door, and you do not displace Bahamians at the white or blue-collar level. That you have a coherent, organized, predictable program, carefully advertised and administered. So that's two of a multiplicity of numerous suggestions we made. This government failed to accept the establishment of a select committee that would involve not only you who show up every day to work, but many Bahamians who wish to contribute their ideas to how we can solve this vexing legacy problem. Now you've done something else. You have damaged your own credibility through your minister with responsibility for immigration in a careless fashion in which he dispenses citizenship. In fact, this is not new for you. Within the first week of coming to office, there were some Asians who were apprehended. And this administration, your administration, was responsible for their release. Recently, we understand that you have at least 100 persons from the Far East who are working in a hotel whose deadline we are unclear of, and we wish to ask the member for Exuma, when will the British Colonial Hotel open? But it's our understanding, and we wish to find out, is it accurate that you have 100 persons without work permits working in British Colonial Hotel, and when they were apprehended by immigration, they were ordered by no less than the minister to release them? Is this accurate, and is there any member who is willing to stand and explain whether this is accurate? And on what basis would they have been released? We are a country of laws. This is a country of laws. And so what the government is doing is on one of the most sensitive issues, you are eroding your own credibility, and a public that's already cynical about all administrations, you are cementing their view that you are not working on behalf of the Bahamian people. Madam Speaker, there's a lot more to be said on that. But what we believe is that the way in which you are approaching the granting of citizenship and work permits and permanent residence is to gain political advantage rather than declare out a backlog that has existed for people who have legitimate applications. Because the question is, if you wish to clear out the backlog, where is the board? Where's the board that was in place, that was dismantled? Have you put in place a new immigration board? And does the director have a chance to sit as the secretary as they ought to when they meet with the immigration board or with cabinet? This government is eroding its credibility as it relates to its willingness to address the vexing issue of immigration. While we were in the budget debate, houses were still being built in communities that the government claims it will dismantle. Well, for God's sake, if you plan to dismantle at some point, would it not make sense for us to make sure no new buildings are being built? And this is not new. It's a cry that some of us made while we sat in the chair. Let's stop what's happening right now, while we seek to deal in the future with dismantling irregular developments. Madam Speaker, this country has an opportunity to build a society that is merit-based, where Bahamians who are overseas would be willing to come home if they believe they have a legitimate shot of sharing in the bounty of this country, where if they believe they have an opportunity to get a job on the basis of their qualification rather than on the basis of their connections. A part of the reason we have tremendous difficulty with this government seeking to expand its influence, even in Freeport, and I'm going to close by talking about Freeport, is that we are so tribalistic in our nature that even getting jobs, grants, these grants from Small Business Development Center, et cetera, is so politicized that a select group of people have access to resources while others don't. And it's a problem. And so persons who believe that once they apply right now, despite the dysfunction of GBPA, and it is in many ways dysfunctional, I can tell you the average Grand Bahamian believes you put that in the hand of central government. Politics will determine how fast things move, who gets their permit approved, which businesses are approved. That is a non-starter, a non-negotiable for the people of Freeport. Madam Speaker, we have an opportunity to create for the next 50 years a different type of society. This administration has to get off business or simply pointing out what was wrong. You have in place leadership, accept it, that we have not governed perfectly, and is prepared to work where necessary in a bipartisan way to move this country forward. What we do not see is a government that is willing to do the same. It's your way or the highway. There's the different rule for you and a different rule for everybody else. You go to Bermuda using public funds. And only when it was discovered did you admit. And then you say you paid it back and gave no evidence that the money has been paid. Refuse to lay one single document on the table of the House. People are going to jail under your administration for moving funds. The question is, how do you get to do it and there are no consequences for this administration? Madam Speaker, there's one rule for the Disled administration, and there is a different rule for the rest of the Bahamas. Time? Madam Speaker, there are many questions this government has to answer. I've outlined a number of them in the area of immigration, Madam Speaker. But the Ministry of Finance also has a number of questions to answer. We're still looking for an answer on how is it that a government can borrow funds from the central bank, then come to Parliament, make a decision to make it retroactive to cover the transgression they made earlier to borrow $174 million, which is the equivalent of 232 million special drawing rights. One rule for the Davis administration and a different rule for everybody else. Madam Speaker, I wish to close just by referencing briefly the situation in Grand Bahama. Madam Speaker, let me be clear. The people of Grand Bahama, in particular the licensees, and I've been a licensee in recent years of the Grand Bahama Port Authority. We do not believe that the Grand Bahama Port Authority is functioning in the most effective manner that is in the best interest of Freeport and by extension the rest of Grand Bahama. And it is the rest of Grand Bahama because they are responsible for regulating even the electricity company that's responsible for East and West Grand Bahama. So we don't believe that the regulatory functions should be in the hands of two private families. There should be an entity, but that entity ought to be controlled by the licensees of the Grand Bahama Port Authority, of Grand Bahama and Freeport, rather than by two families. We also do not believe that the big players ought to have a free ride at 5 or not having to pay. They could sit on land indefinitely, not pay anything, but I'm paying service charge as many other persons are paying service charge. We have to reconfigure that arrangement. We do not believe that those fees that are being paid into that fund ought to be narrowly controlled by shareholders. But the licensees themselves ought to be members of a purpose vehicle created to control those funds. But we also do not believe that central government should be making statements that create uncertainty in the domestic and international market about the future of Grand Bahama without doing the sensible thing, which is to sit down with the opposition, to sit down with the licensees, including the industrials, to sit down with DevCo and GBPA and talk about and discuss the way forward. Madam Speaker, so important is the future of the Hawksbill Creek Agreement and GBPA that we should convene a session of Parliament to have a discussion about the way forward. We should be in Grand Bahama meeting with all the stakeholders, and I believe the member for West End and Bimini, you must be saying this to your cabinet colleagues. Because it is not right what the Prime Minister has done in creating uncertainty about some strong action they're going to take without defining what the action is. Which investor in his right mind is going to deposit money into an uncertain environment? It was uncertain when the two shareholder families were fighting each other. It is uncertain under the Davis-Cooper administration today. And we will resist anything other than having a sensible, reasonable conversation with all stakeholders about the way forward for Freeport in particular and Grand Bahama in general. And we cannot have GBPA regulating itself, regulating companies that, I agree, Hawksbill Creek Agreement does not make provision for IRCA to be regulating the agencies that they wish to regulate in Grand Bahama. But nor should GBPA regulate the utility company that is a revenue generator for the company as well. There should be Bahamian ownership in any future configuration of a GBPA or the Port Group limited group of companies. Bahamians should share in the bounty. But should this administration take over all regulatory functions? I think it's H to the double hockey stick, no. No, this administration should not take over. Okay, H-E. H-E to the double hockey stick. Should not be. And so, it's unparliamentary spelling, but I stand by it. And so, Madam Speaker, we have an opportunity to do something different. And it is my hope that this administration would discontinue squandering the opportunity to set a new direction for this country. Don't brag about what you're doing in terms of natural resources and refuse to pause and explain the Sovereign Wealth Fund and how the benefits from the various resources will ultimately benefit the Bahamian people. We are unprepared as an administration to that discussion with the Bahamian people. We missed an opportunity when we were in office. You are doing the very same thing, missing an opportunity. When it's simple that you ought to put forth a robust piece of legislation based on best practices internationally in setting up Sovereign Wealth Fund, ensure that every one of the natural resources, and there are many, that funds go into it, and they go into that special purpose vehicle for particular reasons to keep the money from being just in the consolidated fund that you could spend any way you decide. And so, Madam Speaker, with those few words, I wish to say that we will support Angleston. All of our team members will support this bill. And however, we say, as I reiterate what St. Anne said at the beginning, that while this is important, he could identify numerous other bills that were substantially more important. That's the point that he made, and we stand with him in that regard. There are other things. Child protection could have been here. Ombudsman could have been here. And so, again, we support this, but we want this government to prioritize the time to deal with the vexing issues that affect Bahamian people now that the pomp and pageantry has calmed down and the partying has paused, if only for a moment. We have an opportunity. Oh, I enjoyed the time I spent with my wife. God is so good. And so we implore this government to get on with the serious business of building a Bahamas that's fairer for all Bahamians, not just PLPs. To build a Bahamas that is committed to getting Bahamians who are from overseas to contribute to this country because you're making them feel welcome and valued, and they believe that they have a place coming back home, and they don't have to be yellow in order to get a job or to advance or to have their matters settled that has been outstanding for years. Madam Speaker, Marco City and the Free National Movement supports this resolution.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Angleston.
Madam Speaker, I neglected to lay on the table as requested by the member for Marco City, and this is the article by Neil Hartnell, Tribune, dated the 26th October 2021, where the company that was hired by the then Prime Minister, Minnis, member for Kalani, to investigate a purchase that was very controversial with the board. We had found that the deal was oblique and not fully transparent. And I'd also like to lay an article in the, where is this? It's an article where the Prime Minister, I'm trying to see it's Eyewitness News article on their site, where the Prime Minister states that to the energy community, this may not fit the definition of crisis, but for Bahamian families that can't cook breakfast, fill their gas tanks, buy groceries, or even charge a cell phone, this is a crisis. I understand the pain, the anger, and the deep frustration of Bahamians, just for those who speak about load shedding and all these other things, but I'll lay it for your review. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Order that the documents be brought up.
Thank you.
Order and documents to lie on the table. As many, the Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Freetown.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As always, when I rise in this honorable place, it is only because the Lord has woken me up today and permitted me to be here. And it's also because of the faith reposed in me by the people of the Freetown constituency, the great constituency of Freetown. And so, Madam Speaker, if I may, before I begin substantially, just speak to them for a moment. Madam Speaker, Fox Hill spoke in the budget about a suggestion that the constituency allowance should be much bigger to permit execution of work in constituencies. Well, as small as it is, Madam Speaker, I'd wish to thank the member for Fort Charlotte that during the flooding in Sutton Street because of the inadequacy of the drains, he was able to make a way for Mr. Terry Delancey to be instructed to assist in actually pumping water that had gathered in the road near the government complex. I'd advise the people of Sutton Street and Lyon Road that if the Ministry of Works doesn't have it aligned in their budget at this time to dig the wells deeper. I intend to deal with that area, Strawn's Alley, and an area in Little Blair that has flooding issues. As has been said, we have the ability to just complain, or we have the ability to do something about it. And I intend, Madam Speaker, to do something about it. Madam Speaker, I would also like to extend condolences to all who have lost loved ones in the Freetown constituency, and may the Lord comfort them in this time of their testing. I'd also like to extend birthday greetings in advance to Mr. Cedric Smith of Okra Hill in Polling Division 12, who will increase in age on the 17th of this month, which is next Monday, as he is visiting his family in Grand Bahama. Madam Speaker, every time we come here, we hear talks about the need to advance the conversation about the betterment of our people. We hear conversations about the need to lead. I would like, Madam Speaker, to say, and it's a shame that Kalani has left by now, because both he and I were born in this colony as subjects of Great Britain and colonies. We are not born Bahamians. The only born Bahamians in this country are 50 years or younger. And so we are not born Bahamian unless we're 50 or younger. The reality of my education, Madam Speaker, is that having been born as a citizen of Great Britain and colonies in the Bahama Islands, on the island of Ragged Island, where there was no generation of power, where there was no water, potable water delivered to homes. When I came up here to New Providence, Madam Speaker, at the tender age of 4 in 1972, I lived in Angliston, in a house that had, in Angliston, next to the dry cleaners down from Kelly Lumberyard. In a house that had no electricity connected to it, as was the reality of many in those days. Madam Speaker, so when, as a boy of 5, I witnessed the beginning of nationhood, because you cannot be a nation if you are a colony. And that's very simple, because if anyone reads our Constitution, anyone from any of the colonies of Great Britain, anywhere in the world, that found themselves in the Bahamas on the 9th of July, 1973, if they so wished, could become a citizen of this country when we gained independence. And so we were colonies. When I was born, we were a colony. And so, Madam Speaker, we hear a lot about nationhood. A very little known fact is that the constitutional framers did not write as it were the Constitution. I challenge all Bahamians with access to the internet to look at the Constitution of Jamaica, of Barbados, of Guyana, of every British territory granted independence in this part of the world, and you will see that the parts are very common. And each one is an act of Her Majesty in Council and an act of the English legislature. Why do I say that, Madam Speaker? The only really unique part about our Constitution, which we should pay attention to, is the preamble. The preamble to our Constitution is something that is truly written by us. And so we own being founded on Christian principles. That's what we insisted on being there. You won't find it in the Jamaican Constitution. You won't find it in the Grenadian Constitution. That is truly us. And so we should be very careful about how we go about discharging this thing called nationhood, because the only significant part of our Constitution that we could have insisted on was the preamble, and we spoke quite clearly, and we should never forget it. That being said, Madam Speaker, I congratulate the member for Seabreeze and the entire Secretariat, and particular mention to Permanent Secretary Jack Thompson. I would hope he isn't one of those who were brought back that was spoken to in strange terms, because he worked himself to the point that on the Clifford Park, I think he had to be taken in an ambulance for treatment. Jack Thompson, yes. Oh, thank you, Sinans. I'd also like to congratulate, Madam Speaker, all of the members of the disciplined forces, the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, the Royal Bahamas Police Force, the Bahamas Department of Corrections, Bahamas Customs, Bahamas Immigration Department. I think it was even the Airport Authority who were out on Clifford Park. I would particularly congratulate the Royal Bahamas Defense Force and Police Force, who had participating in the flag raising that evening members of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force Rangers and police cadets. These are truly the future leaders of this country. Indeed, Angliston and I attended a passing out ceremony for Rangers in leadership position at Project Shore on Saturday. And what was so impressive, Madam Speaker, is we had young people who, after 3 weeks, not having any musical training, were members of a part of a band, played very strongly. And they're drawn from all over the island, from Eleuthera, from Andros, from all over the island, and Grand Bahama. I've heard the cry of Michael that we have the base down in Inagua anyway. And so there's absolutely no reason that the Rangers can't come to Inagua. But Madam Speaker, you have to be deliberate about what you do. You don't always have to talk loudly, and everything isn't accomplished through legislation. The reintroduction in force of the Rangers, the police cadet, targets what we need to be doing.
Yes.
And so you have a choice. You can talk about things, or you can do things. The Defense Force have a saying that they just make it happen.
Yes.
And I would think if it were possible, we, hopefully in the next year or two, will be able to steal that from them. But Madam Speaker, we've heard a lot today. And simply so that it doesn't go unanswered. And I say this, Madam Speaker, as inoffensively as I can, and I continue to say it. I was raised, unfortunately, and Marco City, I don't know if he was raised similarly. If you insist on cussing me, on urinating on me, you have very little chance of influencing me. If you continue to come here, repeat fallacious conclusions of law about failure to comply with the law, not only by politicians, but by senior public service, senior career public servants, you cannot expect for us to take you seriously. When I started, Madam Speaker, I put it simply like this: either you don't know, or you know, and you're doing it for political expediency, or a combination of both. I was raised, Madam Speaker, that you do not just follow the crowd. But it appears that the profound questions that the side opposite does, they lick their finger, put it up in the air, and whichever way the breeze is blowing, they try to go in that direction.
That's it.
Because, Madam Speaker, Fort Charlotte said, and it is undisputable, that you have not had serious infrastructural work on the roads, except when the former administration built those highways through urban areas. You haven't had it. 20 years. That you would expect to have these issues at the same time that we're addressing issues in New Providence. It is only fair that Eleuthera, who has been neglected for much longer, gets work. It's only fair that Exuma, that has been neglected for a long time, gets work. And it's only proper, and Long Island spoke about it, that Long Island, which was neglected, get work. And Andros, we are not a Nassau-centric party. And so the Minister of Works, the member for Fort Charlotte, has set out the major works that are going to be done here. He's also set out that they have had to hire all of these people. Now, Fort Charlotte is really too nice, you know. We're different kind of advocates, Madam Speaker. He's an eloquent advocate. He speaks very highbrow. Let me interpret what he has said for the members of the public. If he has to hire these people, it's because he didn't meet them there. That's kind of simple. And he didn't meet them there when he came and sat in the chair, so now he is ramping up. I have some experience of that in my ministry, Madam Speaker. These are the people, they crash the car, they set it afire, then they tell you, fix it. They crash it, they set it afire, then they tell you, fix it. And while you're putting out the fire and repairing the car, they say, you're not working fast enough. And so when you're met with nobody on the road patching detail, as the minister said, or we're met with, in the family islands, the police with no car to come to you, or BPL as it is, they say, it's y'all's problem, fix it. And fix it now, even though we crash it, set it on fire, y'all fix it. And we're complaining that you haven't fixed it quick enough. Well, let me tell you something about BPL, Madam Speaker. I've had the benefit, maybe because I was a contentious lawyer, of representing the line staff union at BPL and water and sewage, the management union at BPL and water and sewage. And the story of those two utilities is a very interesting one. I'm quite sure my colleague from Central and South Eleuthera would have the story about the machinations with the company that does the water, that creates legacy issues. At the time that I was representing the water and sewage unions, water and sewage had managed to send home the only hydrologist in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas because of a row with the chairman. BPL, the most amazing thing is this, and this is what I gather from the people in the belly of the beast. We must remember, what did the other side do? They thought it was a good idea through VSAPs to pay millions of dollars to send engineers, linemen home. And they talk about the blueprint for change, talking about a comprehensive plan. At the end of the day, Madam Speaker, that is happening. And so BPL is finding itself having to train 25 plus new linesmen because they paid linesmen to go home, and 40 craft and technical apprentices. because they sent them home. They must really forget, Madam Speaker, that when they bought 7 Wärtsilä engines, the 7 could never be started at the same time because of vibration. The people know this. They talk it. The people in the belly of the beast do. And the most amazing thing that the people in the belly of the beast tells you, and they talk about this cost of electricity. This Wärtsilä engine was a new, different kind of solution. But they meant to be efficient by burning heavy fuel oil, bunker C. To burn bunker C, it needs to be heated. For efficiency, the boiler is supposed to be attached to the engine. It's supposed to be fired by the exhaust from the engine. Very efficient. BPL is burning diesel to heat bunker C to be burnt in the engines. So not only is that inefficient, it is terribly expensive. But they want to tell us why electricity is expensive. Talk to the people in the belly of the beast. The 2 engines that are down, unlike what Kalani says, they're down for maintenance. You can't run a car 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year, and don't expect it to break down. And when you do take 2 engines offline, because you should have serviced them after 12,000 hours, and it's now 24,000 hours, it is more expensive and takes longer to service them. Bahamian people are not stupid. People in the belly of the beast will tell them these things. And so let us get to what St. Barnabas calls these profound discussions about these profound questions. You know, it's very easy, you know. It's something that you see, and the Bible tells you it. The broad road ain't always the right road to take. Sometimes you have to sit with people, explain something to them. So when you don't explain to them that, for instance, you have in Andros oil engines, in Ackland's oil engines, in all these places oil engines that may fail, then you could get some brownie points by saying, you light off, eh? You light off. And that's all you're doing. And it is not what leaders are supposed to do. If you are wanting to be leaders, you ought to be able to say, your engine is old. We need this work done. Maybe we need to look at how we do it. That would be very impressive to us. But running on with what you're running on with ain't impressing anyone. It may be doing this and seeing where the wind blows, and you're going along with the breeze. That doesn't work.
That's why they don't debate the bill.
You know, this thing about immigration, you know, what's so bad about this immigration thing? We are castigated because we say we don't want to talk about immigration, we want to do something about it. Repatriating more people than ever before. Running operations. There's some suggestion somehow that the minister is conferring citizenship. Well, you know, the comfort I have, and I told Kalani this in the smoker's room, when we consider what they have to complain about, the little small things, if that's all they can find to complain about, that speaks for itself. That, in fact, speaks for itself. So when on this bill, for instance, they say, oh, well, why don't you have this exemption for other things like cars? We do have it for cars. If you could show the road traffic department that your car was off the road for 5 years, you don't have to pay for it. You don't have to pay for it. So at the end of the day, Madam Speaker, at the end of the day, if you can show that you didn't use the vehicle on the road, the common man, and you prove it, There you go. So we have this being blown and tossed on the wind. We didn't get where I described we started when I was 5 years old in 1973 to today by being blown on the wind. There were positive steps taken, largely by PLP administrations that set up institutions, that expanded education, that expanded health care, that set up the National Insurance Board, that set up the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, that set up BAMSI, that set up COB, that transferred it to UB. This was not being blown on the wind of popularity. This was deliberate behavior. And so I'm proud to be a member of this particular party, and I'm proud to be a member of this administration, because we're not being blown in the wind. You know? It's as simple as, and we have little simple things. You know, we have this very simple thing where we are told that you have a situation where to deal with a right-of-way that has been trafficked for ages, that is done very simply. That is you giving away stuff. And their famous thing, Bermuda.
Some famous thing.
Famous. The famous thing. And you know what makes it sound so silly? They don't believe that Bahamian people have the internet where they can go online and see how do other countries handle this. Because the British Prime Minister travels and takes members of the Conservative Party with him. Every president of the United States travels, and sometimes. And how it is done is exactly how it was done. But they lick their finger, put it in the air, the breeze blow to Bermuda, so they keep talking about it. When Bahamian people have access to the internet and can themselves go and see how it is done. But they can continue to be blown in the wind and blown by the breeze. So, at the end of the day, Madam Speaker, the side opposite talks about arrogance. Arrogance is to speak for other people. In the Bible, you know, the only thing you can speak for is you and your house. And so, at the end of the day, Madam Speaker, we speak for ourselves, we do things. Marco City, famous of saying, everybody believes this, everybody says this, everybody knows this. I just heard, Madam Speaker, I just heard it just now. Nobody is buying that from you. I just heard it from Marco City. You know, Madam Speaker, here he goes again. They don't believe you. Speaking for other people. There you go. Say it again, Marco City. Isn't that arrogant? He's speaking for people on this side. He is like a god. Madam Speaker, you know, he is like a god.
Members. The chair recognizes the honourable member for Marco City.
Madam Speaker, the member for Freetown is seeking to be a revisionist. This administration, from the top, the member for Kid Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador, acknowledged that it was inappropriate for the government of the Bahamas to pay for members of its political party, which is precisely why the party was then called upon to reimburse the government. In law, there is no provision There's no provision in our system. You talk about we could Google and check best practices in other countries. What was done by the PLP was illegal. Illegal. You move money from the government funds to pay for private individuals and acknowledge that you had to reimburse it. So you could twist that any way you want. The public know that when you went to Bermuda, what you did was illegal.
Honorable member.
Sorry?
Marcos, it is like the gift. It's like the gift that keeps giving. He purports to be like God. He can get in Angliston's head, my cabinet colleague, Central and Saudi Lutra head, Western and Bimini, Elizabeth, Centerville, and say, they don't believe this.
Right.
He is able to do this.
He is able, how?
He is able to do
It's
this.
amazing.
I have no doubt he is able to leap buildings in one single bound.
He is amazing.
An amazing man. But, Madam Speaker, you know, the one thing that's very laughable about it is this. They say to us, we have all of these acts on this paper, all of whom are more important than this. I'm going to get the importance of notaries in a minute. But that proposition is, the simple question that people would ask is this: if your view is that these acts were so important, why didn't you pass a one? Why didn't you advance a one? Your date for passing these bills is the 1st of February. You never had them on your mind. So that's the starting point. Now let me explain to the Bahamian public the importance of notaries, the ordinary people. And I think St. Anne's knows better, because St. Anne's used to work closely with Centerville and myself. And so St. Anne's knows that a notary is necessary on every conveyance of land. Every single one. Every single lease. Every single affidavit with regard birth that the two parents have to go to the registry with. The formation of every single company in this country.
They didn't know this?
The need to vouch for many documents in maritime and every walk of life. So there's a proposition that notaries aren't very important. And it's only a highbrow thing. Now, you know, what amazes me is you would not think, no, Elizabeth, St. Anne's, I could forgive St. Anne's, you know, because St. Anne's does not know that this was a document produced by the previous administration. Because he wasn't there. He wasn't there. And what St. Anne's does not know, what St. Anne's does not know is when they produce the document, they only made provision for members of Parliament. It is us who made provisions for the people involved in non-profit organizations who you can't just be doing work for as a lawyer. You have to be employed by them. They have to be paying your national insurance. There's a Privy Council case from this country about the difference between being an employee and a subcontractor. So they were the ones who were providing only for members of Parliament. And that was their choice. The Privy Council decision was very simple. You have a contract of service and you have a contract for service. To be an employee, the person has to exercise control over you, how you do your job. Little things like they have to pay your national insurance. The case involved Imperial Life. It's how they dealt with their agents. They tried to say that they were private contractors, but the nature of their control the Privy Council held meant that these agents were their employees. And so in this bill, you have to be an employee of the non-profit organization. So if perchance you take a time out and go work for them, this relieves the non-profit organization from paying for your notarial license. We put that in there. We put that, well, he didn't know that we put that in there. He knows that part. So if we establish, Madam Speaker, that this bill touches and concerns every single matter that goes on, and also affidavits in the Supreme Court and Magistrates Court. The issue then is, why are these provisions needed? And again, Sinan should know this, because I taught him to be contentious. And contentious in matters of law. You see, Madam Speaker, the old Section 6 simply said this: when you get a license for the first time, it says when it's effective from. When you renew it, it's renewed. Which means, for little people like me who sit down and read through things like this, if I renew it 2 years earlier, that means it was always in force. So if I had done anything in between that 2 years, that's covered. What this provision does is to say, no. You actually get your license, then you have, exactly, and that's why you do this. And I will show you, and Sinan's.
You tried your best.
Madam Speaker, you know, your favorite MP from his seat is explaining to the Bahamian people why this piece of legislation that is, they say isn't important, is so important, because you can have conveyances in jeopardy, you can have registration of persons in jeopardy, you can have actions in jeopardy, but they say this could wait. They say this could wait. They say it ain't important. What this does, Madam Speaker, is put it beyond peradventure. You have to the end of the 31st of December. If you don't do it by the 31st of December, you get a grace period for 30 days where any of these conveyances are safe. And then thereafter, the renewal takes effect from the actual date. Anyone going into a lawyer's office sees their notary license. And so at the end of the day, Madam Speaker, this brings certainty. This brings certainty. I can't tell you, Madam Speaker, how many cases I've done where you go, the first thing you do is look at who is the notary. The next thing you do is check with the Office of the Attorney General whether that notary was a notary at the time. And then sometimes you get to invalidate conveyances, which isn't a problem unless it's a very old conveyance. You get to invalidate all sorts of stuff. This is important, Madam Speaker, and from what is being said from his chair by Sinans, explains why it should be done now. The difference between us and them, you know, Madam Speaker, is our experiences of life tells us how we must act. So because we know what this can do, we see its importance. They don't know what it can do, so they don't see its importance. And that's the difference between us and them on this piece of legislation. It is important, Madam Speaker. It is important that the public knows.
Point of order, Madam Speaker.
The chair recognizes Honorable Martha.
Is seeking to mislead the public. This what we said was crystal clear. Sorry, to borrow a term from your profession. We were pellucidly clear.
That's not
We
one
made the simple point that there were other pieces of legislation that were of greater importance to a wide range of persons. We never indicated that this is not an important piece of legislation. In fact, I said we're supporting it. So you wish to read from the same script. You always read from when we question your priorities. And that script is, okay, because we question or make suggestions, we don't think it's important.
No.
And it's not correct.
No.
It is not correct.
No, but Madam Speaker, you know, and I wouldn't ascribe this to Marco City, but unless you are marvelously wealthy, the only major asset that most Bahamian people will own is their home. And now when you tell me that a bill that seeks to make sure that that one major asset of every Bahamian person is safe isn't as important as the Ombudsman Act, the people generally, that the registration of people's children isn't important to people generally.
Exactly.
Madam Speaker, again, the member is intentionally misleading the public because the member seeks to give the impression so my important aspect. Legislation is solving a particular mischief, something that we need to improve upon. Not every lawyer falls in that category. So all of these other documents that need to be signed, would you be quiet and listen? Madam Speaker, there are any number of other lawyers who are available to sign those documents. The member is seeking to give the impression that if this is not passed, those documents cannot be signed. And that is untrue. It is untrue. Three-piece, just slow your roll.
Freetown, you may
It's a
proceed.
song that says, calm down. Members, calm down.
Madam Speaker, you know, I don't know if the member has read this bill. Because Section 6A.
No, you made a different point. Your point was that
Allow the member to make his point.
Your point essentially is you're suggesting that if this is not passed, those documents can't be signed, in simple terms. And the bottom line is there are many other attorneys who could notarize these documents.
Members, two members on their feet.
You know, Madam Speaker, that's why the Rasta say my lord, because my lord clearly can see in my mind and can't hear what I say. The mischief is not that somebody doesn't sign now. The mischief is that somebody signs now without these things being clear, and it might not be legitimately done. And the one thing that this does, firstly, is makes it quite clear the period for which you can sign. And then some would say the persons who could get the exemption. Well, when you get the exemption, if you read the bill, you have to give up your certificate, your notary public license. You have to send it to the Attorney General, so you won't have it. So you won't be able to show that you're a notary. So you can't fool the public. That's just as simple as this. That's the first part of this bill. The last part of this bill has to do with the waiver. The first part of the bill is making it quite clear about exactly when renewals take effect, which is a very important thing, because it could mean the difference between you owning your house, being able to show documentary title to your house, or not. That's all it is. That's the first part of it. That's 6A. 6B has to do with this waiver. Now, anybody who don't want the waiver could go pay their fee. It's a simple thing. you could go pay your fee. But the reality of it is that you have lawyers in the Office of the Attorney General who have been working there. You have a point of order?
The honorable member for St. Anne's.
Madam Speaker, Freetown is making the public believe that in all his years as a practicing attorney and notary public, once he submitted his fee after making his application for his license renewal, he didn't know what date that license was going to come back as valid.
What's the point of making the public believe?
What you're doing now is you're setting a period when an attorney acting for a client can no longer notarize an instrument, when historically, once that fee was paid, you had a valid notary license from January 1st to December 31st. There was no confusion there. There was no risk to a buyer. There was no risk to a seller. Now what you're doing is adding another risk to the industry, and you're thinking that that's something to stand up and be proud about. You haven't created an expiration and a renewal period. It was always January 1st to December 31st when you paid your fees. Is that not your experience?
Madam Speaker, I don't really understand it as a point of order. I understand it as a question.
Yes.
And if St. Anne's is asking me, I will tell him what I have done in litigation, which is why this is important. What I've done in litigation is to say the Notary Public Act that we have now only has a commencement date when it's initially issued. So notwithstanding that on renewal, sometimes they send you a new certificate, that is just a renewal. And then there will be doubt over, does the thing take effect from the date that's on it, from the date that you send it in, or from the 1st of January. This is making it clear that if you apply basically within a month, the 31st of January would be the latest date for your position to be connected up. Afterwards, it's from the date that you apply, a date that you know. There's no doubt about that. And that would be very clear. And so that's what the first part of this bill does. It changes the position with regard renewals to take away an argument from pedantic people like me, who when I am charged to do something, I actually read the documents, because that's the starting point of it. That's how I was taught across the seas by the member for Cat Island, San Salvador, and Rumkey, by my pupil master, how you go about doing litigation. And so this is trying to secure something that's very important. That's why I actually think it's very, very important. The part about the waiver, that speaks for itself. That says lawyers in the Office of the Attorney General who have been there for 10, 15 years, who then come out and go into practice to do so on a sensible basis. The reality of it, Madam Speaker, is certainly for myself, for Centerville, we can't, and for Elizabeth, for Cat Island, Rumkey, for every lawyer who is a member of the cabinet, you can't notarize a thing at all. So we're like cars that are parked up, can't go on the road with regard to this. That's not true, because they're on the road. So, oh yeah, that's why the Bahamian public should keep us here. So at the end of the day, Madam Speaker, this is not trivial as they say. You just have to understand the importance of it and understand what could happen, and then you could understand why. And so, Madam Speaker, I would say very clearly that this is long overdue. They first proposed it. They didn't move a very simple bill like this. But you have to do it. We have done it. And as it said, we will get to these other pieces of legislation. In fact, we have others. The consultation on the new parole and reentry bill that's proposed is starting this week. So as we work here, we continue to work elsewhere. We can walk and chew gum. That's a skill that we possess. So while we do this, not only do we have what's on the agenda, we have other bills, Madam Speaker, that we are considering. And so Freetown is very clear about the approach, Madam Speaker. And the public needs to be very clear about it. And I would say, and I would just end with this because some of my supporters in Freetown have said this to me. I know that we now have a little running joke about Mr. Bread Basket and bread in the basket and that, Madam Speaker. But persons suggest this. It is distasteful to believe that you can dictate to people what they must eat. It's even more distasteful when it is more distasteful. It's more distasteful. It's more distasteful. It's more distasteful, Madam Speaker. It's more distasteful when a government moves price control on a broader class of items and the side who is crying that you must eat this particular thing says we should wait to bring that relief. We have to be very careful. We have to be very, very careful when we do what we do. I'm quite sure St. Barnabas knows what's the most popular meal in St. Barnabas.
What's popular in Freetown?
What do you get? Pork chop, chicken. Neither of which is a bread basket item. Both of which experience a 2% reduction in price. Both of which. There's a big cry. Sedan says his light bill is high. Just burn less air conditioning, my brother.
No, I got all my family in one house.
Burn less air conditioning, my brother. You know, Madam Speaker, I was going to be very short. Sedan's bought out his light bill. I don't know what he does in his house, but my light bill, Madam Speaker, is never more than $300. So I don't pay VAT. Now, I must confess, Madam Speaker, being from Ragged Island, I don't air condition my house when I'm not there.
Even if the 5 days old?
I don't air condition my house when someone is not there.
You gotta clarify this now. You gotta clarify this. Even if the 5 days old, they got right there. Yes or no?
Marco City, get thee behind me. Get thee behind me, Marco City. Get thee behind me. Get thee behind me, Marco City. Madam Speaker, the reality of it is this. And in this year of Jubilee, we have to be grateful for where we've come from. We have to remember, though, where we've come from in order to be truly grateful. And we really, really, to use the words of St. Barnabas, we need to stop spending time on trifling things and start to have the profound debates, because there are things that are very serious that we can cross swords on. This bill, Madam Speaker, should have taken we should have been out there from this morning. But it is what it is, Madam Speaker. As the young people say, Madam Speaker, Freetown supports this bill.
Thank you, Honorable Member. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a second time and committed. A bill for an act to amend the Notaries Public Act. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. Order that the bill be read a second time and committed.
A bill for an act to amend the Notaries Public Act.
For the second readings?
Take the chair as we resolve into committee of the whole.
Is there a seconder? Thank you, honorable members. It has been moved and seconded that the House do now resolve itself into the committee of the whole with the deputy speaker and the chair. As many are in favor, will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. The House will now resolve itself into the committee of the whole with the deputy speaker and the chair.
Mr. Forbes, give me a piece of paper, please. One of those, so I can write on.
Listen, the beauty of my cousin Alex is 90% of the Bahaman people ain't follow that.
That's right.
Now, the intelligentsia follow it. The intelligentsia.
Yes, my lord. 90% of your
The whole.
Mr. Chair, I now move that the Notaries Public Amendment Bill 2023, long title.
Is there a seconder? It has been moved and seconded that the long title of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. The long title of the bill is agreed.
So therefore, I now move that the short title of the bill be agreed.
It has been moved and seconded that the short title of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. The short title of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I move that clauses 2 through 4 be agreed.
It has been moved and seconded that clause 2 through 4 of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. Clause 2 through 4 is agreed.
So therefore, I now move that the bill in its entirety be agreed.
It has been moved and seconded that the bill in its entirety be agreed. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. The bill in its entirety is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I now move that the Speaker to take the chair.
It has been moved and seconded that the Speaker do now take the chair. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. The Speaker will now take the chair.
I think she causing the problem.
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to report that the committee has examined several bills, making no amendments thereto.
Thank you. Don't worry, members. I soon start tossing some of them out. Then they'll learn respect. You know what the green carpet feel like. And you all go follow right behind. Honorable members, the Deputy Speaker and Chairman of the Committee of the Whole has reported, and the committee has examined the bill, having made no amendments thereto. Third reading and passing of bills.
Speaker, I now move for third reading passing of the Notaries Public Amendment Bill 2023.
Thank you, Honorable. Thank you, Honorable members. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a third time and passed. A bill for an act to amend the Notaries Public Act. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. Order that the bill be read a third time and pass.
A bill for an act to amend the Notaries Public Act.
Order that this bill do now pass and the title thereof declared to be Notaries Public Amendment Bill 2023. Further third reading and passing of bills?
No further third readings.
Order that the clerk to take the bill passed in this House today to the Honorable Senate for their concurrence. Now we will revert back to the order of business. Consideration of Senate's amendments, resolutions, member statements, appointment of select committees, instruction to select committees, discharge of select committees, notices for future meetings.
Notices, all notices in the name of the government.
Madam Speaker, we wish to give notice of questions, and have those questions be placed on the record.
Thank you, Honorable Member.
Can I have the podium, please?
Adjournment?
No, podium. Waiting for the podium.
Oh. It's taking long. I thought we could have gone. Sure, I may have a little bit of water. Please, just a minute.
My wife sent me to work. She said, go to work at work.
Madam Speaker, will the Honorable Minister Bell advise how many persons were sworn in as citizens outside of the precincts of the Ministry of Immigration and where? Will the Honorable Minister Bell provide a breakdown of persons who were granted citizenship since September 16, 2021? Will the Honorable Minister Bell advise if he gave directives for Chinese workers who were employed in the British Colonial Hotel to be released after they were found to be in breach of the Bahamian labor laws? And please indicate the justification for such interference into the work of immigration officers. 3, will the Honorable Minister Bell advise this Honorable House on the steps the government has taken to stop the ongoing construction of illegal structures throughout the Bahamas? Will the Honorable Minister Bell advise the House why government officials, law enforcement, and land inspectors aren't in place to prevent further construction of illegal structures? Will the Honorable Minister Bell provide an update on the progress and accomplishments of the task force assigned to address the issue of illegal migration? Will the Honorable Minister Bell advise the Honorable House on the government plans to strengthen the surveillance units and improve monitoring, tracking, and interception of illegal migrants entering the Bahamas using visas? Will the Honorable Minister Bell advise this Honorable House on the government's strategy for addressing the backlog of applications for work permits, visas, permanent residence, and citizenship? Will the Honorable Minister Bell advise the Honorable House on the government's intention to engage the population in a discussion about the pathways to Bahamian citizenship and conduct a forensic audit of the government agencies involved in migration and immigration? Will the Honorable Minister Bell provide an overview of the comprehensive immigration and migration policy that the government plans to put in place? How will it address issues such as engagement with the Haitian government, CARICOM, the IOM, the OAS, the UN, the EU, and regional partners? Will the Honorable Minister advise this Honorable House what measures will be taken to develop a regularized means of migration from Haiti? Will the Honorable Minister Bell provide the information on the process to audit current work permit holders and scrutinize the visa granting process. Will the Honorable Minister Bell provide the number of applicants for citizenship that have been approved since the Privy Council's ruling, how many of which were persons from the Caribbean region? Will the Honorable Minister Bell advise this Honorable House on what specific amendments are being proposed to the immigration, in parentheses, vessels restriction, regulations, and how will they contribute to better border control? Will the Honorable Minister Sayers provide the Honorable House with the breakdown of BPL's $150 million in arrears? Will the Honorable Minister Sayers advise this House on the cause of the fire in the North Andros power plant? Will the Honorable Minister Sayers provide the Honorable House the recommendations that were made in the aftermath of the fires in Bimini, Exuma, and New Providence? Were these recommendations applied in Andros or elsewhere? Will the Honorable Minister Sayers provide a date when complete and permanent restoration can be expected in Andros? Will the Honorable Minister Sayers provide this Honorable House a detailed explanation of the $110 million loan provided to BPL, including the terms of the loan, the interest charged, and its contribution to the fuel surcharge experienced by BPL customers? Will the Honorable Minister Sayers acknowledge that the loan provided to BPL must be accounted for within the approved budgetary appropriations authorized by Parliament as required by the Public Debt Management Act and the Constitution? How does the government plan to rectify the situation and ensure proper accounting for the loan? Will the Honorable Prime Minister Davis advise why he failed to mention the new construction of unregulated homes on public and private lands in his national address? Will the Honorable Prime Minister Davis advise this Honorable House on how this government intends to deal with the irregular construction on Crown land in Central Abaco? Will the Honorable Prime Minister Davis advise the Honorable House of the terms of engagement for the consulting firm McKinsey & Company? What procurement process was used to engage this firm? How many bids were received? What is the value of the contracts? And how much has been spent to date? Yeah, so I'm moving those that are already on the agenda. Yes, thank you. The independence, I rebuke that in Jesus' name. The Independence Secretariat indicated that approximately $2+ million was spent on the renovations to Clifford Park in preparation for the 50th anniversary celebrations. Will the Honorable Minister of Finance and/or the Chairman of the Secretariat, Miller Bryce, provide to this Honorable House the listing of expenditures included? Who were the contractors engaged and the cost of each? Was this process placed to tender, and what was the scope of works? Can the Honorable Minister Cooper provide a target opening date for the British Colonial Hotel? Will the Honorable Minister Munro advise this Honorable House on its methods of addressing maritime border security and safeguarding the sovereign integrity of our borders? Will the Honorable Minister Glover Roll advise this Honorable House on the number of retired public officers who have returned to work, and are these public officers receiving full pension and pay? Will the Honourable Minister Campbell advise the Honourable House on what steps will the government take to strengthen agencies and the Fiscal Responsibility Council to ensure timely reporting of statutory reports and enhanced transparency and accountability? Will the Honourable Minister Colby Davis provide an explanation as to why there was no public announcement or press release regarding the award contracts worth $3.35 million to Digisoft for software development in the Port Department and $3.57 million annually to Adolpha Maritime Group for the maintenance and upkeep of the navigational aid? Will the Honourable Minister Colby Davis advise this Honourable House if the contract for software development at the port, why was the contract not awarded to the winning bidder as listed in the portal, and in parentheses, in the procurement portal, in parentheses, Infrasoft Technologies, but instead to a company called Digisoft Technologies? What was the rationale behind this decision? Will the Honourable Minister Colby Davis provide information about the bidding process for the Digisoft contract? Did Digisoft submit a bid during the formal bidding process? Similar. Will the Honourable Minister Colby Davis advise this Honourable House why was there no information available on the government procurement portal regarding the bidding process for this $3.57 million annual contract regarding the contract awarded to Adolpha Maritime Group? How many bids were received and analyzed, and what decision did the Tenders Board reach in respect of this contract? Will the Honourable Minister Colby Davis advise this Honourable House on why her ministry failed to publish the summary details of these awarded contracts as required by the Public Procurement Act? What is the government's justification for not complying with this obligation? Wonderful. Madam Speaker? The additional question.
What?
To assist the member for Marco City, the question put to the member for Seabreeze is not acceptable by rule. Could only be put to the minister.
Thank you.
The chair recognizes the honourable member for St. Anne's.
Thank you very much. Madam Speaker, will the Honourable Minister advise why the roads are not being properly maintained to standards? Sorry? Huh? Boy, everybody wants to know. Will the Honourable Minister of Works advise why the roads are not being properly maintained to standards that are safe for vehicular road users?
Which road?
You don't want to. You don't want me to tell you which road, brother.
Which road? Locust Quarters or Tulip Key? I'm asking for my constituents.
Speak during member statements. Madam Speaker, it's always a pleasure to be in your company. Will the Honourable Minister of Works advise on the number of contractors that are engaged to patch potholes, including unpaved, utility-lifted sections of our roads? Are the engaged contractors following best practices and using the proper materials to complete road repairs? Or is that a reason some of the road repair patchwork breaks down after a short period of time? Will the Honourable Minister of Works confirm how many persons at the Ministry of Works have the responsibility to assess our roads on a regular basis, to report sections in need of pothole patchwork including unpaved, utility-lifted sections of our roads. Can the Honorable Minister of National Security advise if there have been any road fatalities since 2022 that were caused by or contributed to by the poor state of our roads, including potholes and unpaved, utility-lifted sections of road? Can the Honorable Minister of Works advise if there are systems in place, and if so, what systems are in place to improve the correction time from the starting point of identifying a pothole or section of road in need of repair to the end of actual completion period? That completes my questions, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, honorable members. Order that the notices be brought up. You only signed these here? What is it?
All is gonna fit in the box. I like to turn up the gas. All is gonna fit in the window. That's a good one. Yeah, we gonna fit in the box. But these are what, little small light. I just say you be careful, you fit the standard, this is for. Driving. Who's gonna drive? I know who shouldn't drive. Who's that? Too much for me. I'm holding Elizabeth. I'm holding Elizabeth. I like my family live through there, be careful now. I told them to vote for you. Be careful. If you still if you still want them votes. You still want them votes. You know you didn't tell them that. You know what I mean? You got a lot of family. Your friends and find what I tell them vote for. Roll up. And your friends in Marathon, Yamakro, family. I tell him he's a good man. You know where my family lives. You know where my family lives. So what? You know my family. What you mean? Okay. Some family in the Luke Rock. I tell them vote for Clay. I tell them vote for Clay. handle this before you, man. Yeah, all your generals is my boys. We know the same pot. We do a lot of bad things together. Hey, hey, hey. Some more people like to tell them about this guy, we know him a long time. All of this stuff. Yeah, they have to tell you. No, you have to help me. No, I'm nervous. I've been around there before you. I've been around there before you. No, man, I ain't have to claim with that. I don't have to adopt them people. I don't have to adopt them people. Well, that's fine, all us getting help, All us getting help. All us getting help. Yeah, that's fine. I know who help you too, and I leave that right there. Who? Oh, South Beach? South Beach is my friend. He's my friend. South Beach? Don't get between me and South Beach now. Well, I ain't got no, that's all right. So, no, I got a WhatsApp him. We communicate by modes and recognition. Modes and recognition,
What time it is?
10 to 7, Miles.
10 to 7.
10 to 7.
For several of you all who are talking, I just want you all to know that the Holy Spirit is working through me to keep you all out of trouble from leaving here early and not going home.
Madam Speaker, I think I have another question.
No, you have no more questions. of the notices to lie on the table. Further notices?
The opposition, Madam Speaker, and I wish happy birthday to Pastor Franklin Bethel.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Yamacraw.
Just want to lay the document I read from the Tribune article, July 27, 2021, on BPL is failing its customers.
Have us here all night.
Thank you, honorable member. Order the document be brought up.
No, this is the one this is the one they sent him from the war room.
Yeah, I should read the document.
He got that.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Battalion 6. Battalion
Order the
666.
document to lie on the table.
Yeah,
Adjournment?
just making noise most of the time.
Madam Speaker, I now move that the House adjourns to Wednesday, July 19th, 2023, at 10 a.m.
Is there a seconder? Second. Thank you, honorable member. It's been moved and seconded
I will inform
that
you,
the
sir.
business of this House be
The
adjourned to
volunteer
Wednesday,
will be one of them.
Wednesday, 19th of July, 2023, at 10 a.m. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. Final adjournment?
Madam Speaker, I now move the House stands adjourned to Wednesday, July 19th, 2023, at 10 a.m.
Thank you, honorable member. It's been moved and seconded of the business of this House stands adjourned to Wednesday, July 19, 2023, at 10 a.m.
All